The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
So I think we're well versed, Warren Ingram, director at Galileo Capital, contributor to The Money Show, personal financial advisor. We're well versed with the risks and the fears and the worries about running out of money in retirement. We haven't put enough away. Inflation has corroded your money. You've not been able to make ends meet, so you've spent your money. And now there's not enough, and you're now dependent on others. But this idea of dying with too much money is a weird idea. I mean, we wish we could all have that problem. Why does that worry you?
It's actually the saddest outcome that I see in financial planning, where people live extremely frugal lives. For their whole working career, they sacrifice an incredible amount to make sure that they can provide for their families, that they can build up enough money for their retirement, and potentially that they can leave some money behind to their kids. And that sounds, like a perfect outcome. But when you meet people in a position like that, very often the sacrifices they've made are enormous, and maybe not financial, but they come at a massive human cost. They live very limited lives. They compromise a quality of life for themselves, very often for their families as well. Even their children, the very children they're trying to help over their lifetime. And you find that when you speak to them later in life, especially late into retirement, that they have enormous regret, because they know they've now achieved their objective. They will have enough money, and when they die, they will leave money behind. But they've just got so many things that were undone, so many ways they could have helped people during their lifetime that unfortunately has passed now, and so it is actually a real thing, and when you talk to people in this position, they've got this thing called, it's a scarcity mentality, where they're just always afraid that there won't be enough of something. They're always afraid that markets won't grow, inflation will run out, or economies will collapse, the world will end, whatever it is. But there's enormous fear, and it's such big fear that often they can't break out of the behavior of a lifetime of saving and not spending.
I get it, and I think I understand. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, by the way, it'd be lovely to hear from you this evening. Warren Ingram is available to take your calls on this and other issues, of course, and just pop a seed into our minds as to what you'd like us to address too. You could do that via WhatsApp on 072 702 1702. Give us a call or drop us an SMS or tweet me at Bruce Business. I look at that and I say, well, that's got to be less bad than the alternative, which is not trying hard, not being frivolous, being very disciplined, yet still running out of money. And running out of money surely is more terrifying, because it's the thing we talk about more often than this problem of the regret of not having lived well enough, or not having shared enough, or not having taken advantage of opportunities in your life for fear of running out of money.
Sure, and the financial problems of people in our country are enormous. So I agree. If you talk about scale, the scale of people who don't have enough, every single day, and won't have enough at retirement is there. But we do need to talk to everybody in our country, and there are lots of people who've grown up in our country with extreme poverty, and they might well be the very first generation to come out of that, and to be earning good money now, and living with this almost crushing fear. And I know it sounds like it's kind of complaining about too much rain when you're a farmer. It's not. It's a real problem that a lot of people face. And the idea is to say to them, you can find balance. This is not about saying that you shouldn't save for retirement, or that you should just be frivolous with your money. It's about saying, like everything in life, the best outcomes are always about balance. It's about making sure that you do save enough for your own rainy day, and potentially leave behind some money to your children. But at the same time, while you are relatively young, and you get the idea that you have got sufficient money, especially if you've got adult children. It's one of those things where if you talk to adult children at the age of 25 or 30, and they are children of financially successful parents, the children might well be working very hard. They might have inherited their parents' work ethic and potentially some of their attitude to money. And those are youngsters that could do an enormous amount with a little bit of an earlier inheritance, where they can set themselves up on a path to financial freedom much more quickly than their parents could ever have done. But unfortunately, the parents are so afraid either of just discussing this with their kids, or afraid of running out, that they don't take the chance to actually make a big impact on their children's lives financially, when everybody can benefit. So I know it always sounds like a crazy problem, but I can't tell you the number of times I've met people in their late 70s, mid 80s with just massive regret, and how many times I wish someone had just managed to speak to them earlier in life, where they could make a change and a huge impact.
Is there a formula? Is there a mechanism that we can use, at least to begin this process? Because I realize it's a very, very emotive, and very technical process to assess your level of financial stability and to say, you know what, you're likely, you're 60 years old or you're 50 years old or whatever the case is, this is your financial position. This is how much you are likely to require. And let's put a little bit of extra in, because we don't want you, if you happen to outlive expectations, you go beyond your 90th birthday for several years, and then your health begins to take toll and you need money for medical care and all of that sort of stuff, which is, the curse of old age, of course, or older age. So let's make sure that you're comfortable. But actually, there's some left over. So how do we approach this particular, quite thorny and difficult topic, Warren?
I think there's a fairly basic rule of thumb that we could use, and that is to look at our expenses in a normal year and to say, well, if you take everything that you would spend over a typical year of life, and that means your normal monthly expenses of groceries and medical aid and all of those things, plus a monthly amount that you would use to spend on holidays. Even if you don't go on holiday every month, if you go on holiday 2 or 3 times a year or once a year, just take that holiday expense divided by 12 to get a monthly amount. And then the expenses that that might occur less frequently, for example, replacing a car every 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it is that you choose, and get to that that sort of monthly amount, and then say, right, so over my lifetime, this will be a fairly typical expense in today's values, and then multiply that by 12, so you get to a normal year, and that yearly amount, multiply that by 25. If you really want to be conservative, you can go to 28 or 30, but I think 25 is perfectly sufficient. And that's how much retirement capital you need to fund your life for the rest of your lifetime. So if you end up with way more than that, you know very comfortably that you've got excess money, and you've potentially got money that you can start giving to your children. And I'm not saying give it all away at once. I'm saying smaller amounts, every few years would make an enormous difference to them.
We don't want to spoil the children, though, Warren. You know what kids like today. How do we know they're not going to just waste it? Is what I'm hearing people say. Because I've got super good hearing. Yeah.
It sounds like it's coming out of your head as well, and I think it's a fair comment. And I'm not saying that you necessarily raise children who don't have a work ethic and don't have a saving ethic themselves. It's about striking balance. It's about understanding your family, understanding your objectives, your wishes. There are lots of people that might say, I don't want to give my kids a lot of money. I don't want them to kind of become trust fund children. My business partner always calls them trustafarians, but potentially you want to, you might want to see that some of that money goes to causes that you care about, so to education or wildlife or whatever it is. But the comment then is do it earlier, and certainly for your adult children, and I do mean that. I don't think you start giving away big lump sums to children at the age of 18 or younger, or 21 or younger. But potentially, if you're helping them, for example, buy a family home for themselves, that's not spoiling them. that's helping them get started. And certainly later, when it's time for them to put their kids through school, that's another way you can help very constructively. That's a pure investment.
And I mean, you could, again, we're getting a bit, run the risk of being a bit technical here, but you could, if you want to say to your children, okay, you know what, education's expensive. I'm going to create a trust fund, and we're going to put money in that trust fund, and that's going to be to educate your kids. Because that's a definable cost, because you want your kids to go to private school, that's fine. There is an equal amount for each child in the family, maybe for grandchildren, whatever. If you choose not to have children, that's fine, but those that do can get those children educated, and perhaps you do it that way. And in so doing, I suppose, is there less tax complexity in that? Because you start making big donations to children, more than 100,000 Rand a year, you start running into tax problems. Are there smart ways of doing it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for example, setting up a trust is one, and I think there are some smart tax people out there that probably know this better than me. But I think there are some opportunities for grandparents to fund the cost of education for grandchildren in a fairly tax efficient way as well. And certainly, if you've got adult children who are still financially dependent on you, funding their education is not a problem either. But I also think about we talk a lot about small business in South Africa, about helping get small business going, and that's another route that I think parents with money can help their kids. If your children are so inclined to start businesses, starting a business with them by helping them get the capital going. And again, I'm not necessarily saying just give it to them, but commercial kind of commercially viable loans that you help to underwrite might be one of those things. I just think it's there's actually a lot you can do once you start to sit down and talk to them about what they need. And how you help them. And I think, having these conversations just as, two parents and not actually talking to adult kids is kind of typical, I think, in South Africa. And it's a conversation you should be having as a family, and then to see what is the impact with, how can you make the biggest impact on your adult children, and then also, make sure, as you say, that you do it tax effectively, because you certainly don't want to be in a position where you're paying away massive donations taxes, without having taken that risk on knowingly.
And then be fair about it. Ensure that there is equality, and kids are treated in the same way across the board as well. I think it's a wonderful idea, Warren. And this idea, but you can't have this conversation until you are 100% comfortable, because you can't be making promises to kids and then going, actually, I might run out of money. I know I promised you 100. Here's 10. Because that just breeds bad feeling and bad faith. You've got to have a very, very clear, razor-sharp focus on your own personal finances before you can start even beginning to have these conversations, I would think. Because you don't want to be, pushed into a corner where you've made a promise or given an indication of a promise, and then suddenly, kids feel like you're backtracking on something, and they've been banking on it, or they've, suddenly grown their ambition because they were anticipating a cash windfall or some assistance somehow.
And equally, if you are very confident that your children will stop or really take their foot off the gas in terms of their own work ethic and their own attitude to money, then setting aside larger amounts for trust funds for future children, future generations, your grandchildren or your grandchildren's grandchildren, then that makes more sense, because you certainly don't want to throw good money after bad, and history's full of those, where massive fortunes are created and they get blown by the next generation or two. That also doesn't make sense to me either. So it's all about conversation and balance.
Quick question from Paul, who's in Kyalami this evening. Your question for Warren. Hello, Paul.
Good evening, Bruce and Warren. Hello. A very quick question. You were just talking about the amount of money one should have in a savings pot when you can retire safely, and you spoke about 25 times an annual budget, let's just say. Can you confirm that number should be before or after tax?
Good question. Thank you, Paul. Absolutely. Thank you, Paul, very much. Please listen on the radio. Warren?
Thanks, Paul. I should point that out. You're right, and it's 25 times what you need to spend on a monthly basis or an annual basis. So it's 25 times what needs to arrive in your bank account, and what you will be spending in that bank account every month. So if your cost of living is actually 100,000 rand a month, just because I need to do the math simply, then times that by 12, and it's 1.2 million. So then it would be 25 times the 1.2 million.
And it's after-tax money, obviously. Thank you. Because, yes, you will have tax implications and capital gains tax and all sorts of things in investment portfolios, depending on how you've structured your finances. So, yes, it's after-tax money that you need to be ensured that you have on that one. A question from Andila. I think it's a two-part question. Lots of talk in the news recently about a wealth tax and grey listing of South Africa's financial institutions. Should I be worried about either of these, and what should I do about it? Wealth tax first?
Yeah. So wealth tax. I know it's getting some news, and one or two sort of ANC heavyweights, kind of expressing their own opinions that this is wealth tax should be created to fund, basic income grant or universal basic income or something like that. And these are opinions of individuals. It's not the research by government, or certainly not the Treasury saying this is what they're going to implement. It's just people floating ideas.
But it's part of an ANC policy discussion, and the ANC wants this to be studied in great detail. And it came throughout the ANC policy conference. So it feels far more real than perhaps it is, Warren. And again, it's one of these scary things that comes through because it looks like an easy solution. It's a populist solution. It's a madcap solution. Because, yes, you raise maybe, a bit of money in the first year, those who haven't managed to hide their wealth away from you yet. And after that, what do you do? The focus has got to be on growth and on opportunity rather than simply milking the old cow that, whose udder is dry, unfortunately.
Yeah, the car is fairly lean at the moment. I think why I'm certainly not in the business of political forecasting, but for me, why I'm not too concerned about this particular issue is we've already seen a reduction in corporate tax. We've already seen an acknowledgement by Treasury that South Africans are actually overtaxed, and when they have the capability to do so, Treasury would like us to see lower taxes, because that is a way to generate growth. So your focus on growth, I think, is right, Bruce, and I think that there is a fair realization amongst portions of the politicians that more taxes actually goes against growth. There is a point where too much tax is counterproductive, and we are at that point now, I would argue. And so rationally, one should actually reduce taxes if you want to promote growth. But it's one that we might need to panic about this in future. But I think this is a bit like nationalizing the Reserve Bank or expropriation without compensation. It causes a lot of fear because it's a discussion. It's something that needs to be investigated at an ANC level, and that's an important point, not at government level right now, and might well just die a quiet death once the investigation is done and actual hard numbers are shown and proper research is done.
Yeah, again, just because it's illogical doesn't mean it won't happen, but just because it's being discussed doesn't mean that it will. All it does is breed deep insecurity, and it's completely illogical. All of these ideas are illogical. They're easy, or they're perceived to be easy wins, and they simply are not, which is why I'm not particularly worried about that one. But what about the grey listing of South Africa's financial institutions? This is imminently more possible and quite scary.
I think I feel a bit more worried about this. I'm more confident that this is going to happen. I don't think that we've taken enough action early enough as a country, as a government, to get what we need to get done by October. And certainly, I think the parliamentarians, not saying at cabinet level, but below that, certainly have been extremely lax about this. By all accounts, these laws have been sitting in the previous president's on the previous president's desk for years, and nothing was done. And so I just don't see that we've got enough time to get all of this sorted out. I do think. And if you look at the list of countries that have been grey listed, there are some rather scary ones. You don't want to be in a category of Cambodia and Haiti and Mali and Morocco and the like. Those aren't the luminaries of the world's economy, and so we need to get off that list if we are going to go on there. And I think it's going to be about the direction. It's going to be about saying, if we get on, how quickly can we get ourselves off that list? And so the laws that might need to be changed relatively quickly need to be done, and we need to get our politicians to take this seriously right from top to bottom. We can't have parliamentary committees saying, let's investigate further, which is kind of what they have been saying. They need to understand this is really serious. This is something that we need to address and correct, as a matter of deep urgency.
Warren Ingram from Galileo Capital. Thank you, Warren, very much indeed. Andile, 2 great questions from you this evening. Thank you very much indeed. And Warren, for your contribution as always on a Thursday night. Thank you. In a moment, I'll just give you a quick insight as to what's happening after Eyewitness News.